An Oklahoma teacher who voted for Donald Trump in 2016 is now regretting her decision. And it's based on his handling of coronavirus and his urging for schools to reopen. Nancy Shively is terrified at the thought of having to go back to school and teach. She's a special ed teacher. And she wrote an opinion piece in USA Today about this, saying, quote, "I fear that with that vote, I may have signed my own death warrant." Let me give you a few more excerpts from what she writes. She says, "I'm a special education teacher and lifelong Republican who reluctantly voted for Donald Trump in 2016 as the less bad of two bad choices. When the pandemic hit, the incompetence of the man for whom I voted and the complicity of everyone around him forced me to admit that I could no longer maintain any kind of self-respect as a Republican. So even though I had voted Republican in every presidential election since 1976, I changed my voter registration to independent, and I will be voting for Joe Biden in November." And she, gives some specific details about her experience as a teacher, her profession. And I think that what she writes here is important because it shows that there really is a disconnect between the information voters are receiving from the media, really, and what these two parties represent. So you'll get what I'm talking about once I read this. She says, "I live and teach in a small Oklahoma town. It's not far from the site of President Trump's Tulsa campaign rally on June 20th. That appears, as common sense would have predicted, to be a super spreader event. About 2 weeks after the rally, Tulsa County reported a record high number of cases. I am over 60 with 2 autoimmune diseases. This outbreak has me worried as it is. Now, with the prospect of schools reopening in a few short weeks, I am terrified. Our country has long devalued and underpaid teachers, refusing to adequately fund the public schools that support our democracy. At the same time, teachers routinely have to use their own money to buy classroom supplies. So I would argue that anyone who's looked into how public schools have been defunded in this country and how taxpayer money has been funneled away from public schools and into private schools in many of these red states, someone like Nancy should have been aware that the Republican Party has been pushing for that. That public education has been dismantled because of the very party she had been voting for since 1976. So look, she's a special ed teacher. She has a full plate, and it's unfortunate that the media that many people do consume just doesn't give Americans the information they need to make the right choices for themselves and for the country.
Yeah, so first I want to distinguish between Republican politicians and Republican voters. So Republican politicians are perfectly aware of who Donald Trump is and how incompetent he is, how he's bungled coronavirus, how malicious he is, and they signed up for it 100%. So I'm not interested in any of their late conversions, okay? And they're all full of crap. And as the election gets closer and the polls get worse for them, all of a sudden they find disagreement with Donald Trump. Total, utter liars, cheesy, horrible politicians. Now, for Republican voters, I'm happy to have them see the light and convert. And so, look, here's one thing we underestimate. So it's not like I'm soft on Republican voters. I'm one of the very few people in media who've criticized them enthusiastically at times for leading towards, a guy who's more and more racist and a party that's more and more racist. So I'm not absolving all Republican voters, not by a long shot. I'd be the last person to do that. But if you really were culturally Republican, and that's a real thing, in big parts of this country, there's almost no one who's a Democrat. And so it's frowned upon so much that you get nonstop, basically programming saying Democrats are bad, Republicans are good, and it's a cultural thing and it's an identity thing. So if you have finally gotten past that identity issue and those cultural issues to say, no, I can see it now. 2 + 2, it does equal 4, and this does endanger my life, I'm out. Well, I love that, and that's fantastic. The last distinction is people who recognize it in time, and then people who don't. The easy one is politics, right? Don't tell me a couple of years from now that you voted for Trump twice, but then realize it was a mistake in the year 2024. I'm not interested in that mistake. Total nonsense, okay? But if you realize it now and you actively go in the other direction, wonderful. Look, that leads me to the 30-year-old in Texas who went to a COVID party and said, as he was dying, and he did die, I think I made a mistake. I thought it was a hoax. So it's not a hoax. Don't wait till it's too late. Whether it's politics, but much more importantly, on this issue, on healthcare, on your life, don't mess around. Listen to scientists and doctors, not politicians.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.